Today's episode is brought to you by us here at Call to Action Podcast with Dimension Software. Our team puts in a lot of work into each episode, from researching, reaching out, connecting, scheduling the guests, to preparing the interview and filming, recording, and the post-production work so that by the time it hits your ears, it's an enjoyable experience for you, our amazing listeners. Some have asked us how you can show support. And I tell them it's quite simple and takes less than a minute of your time. Tap that subscribe button on whatever platform you listen on, leave a comment for all the YouTubers watching, or leave a quick review on Apple Podcast or whichever platform allows for them. And guess what? If you like what we're doing, let us know. And if we completely suck, do similarly. We want honest feedback so that we can continually improve and evolve, as our goal for the show is to be up there as one of the best. If you want to learn more about what we do for our day job, visit our website, dimensionsoftware.com. We are a local software engineer and design firm in sunny Santa Monica, California. Our expertise is in custom Shopify e-commerce stores and native mobile app platforms for established companies and startups. We have a contact form on the site, or you can get in touch with us at hello@dimensionsoftware.com. We hope you enjoy this upcoming episode. Hit it. Welcome to the Call to Action Podcast, where we bring you incredible people and even more incredible stories, with discussions and topics about what it takes to sacrifice everything to overcome hardships and failures to achieve success. Our guests heard the call. Now it's your turn.
That's why the Emmy, right?
Brilliant.
We won the Emmy as Fox Sports team covering the World Cup. Why? Because they said, there are 32 teams on the pitch in the tournament, but the 33rd team is Russia itself, and nobody knows anything about it. So they spend endless hours covering the players, the teams, but one of the major players, the country where this is all happening, nobody knows anything about. So they turn to NatGeo, and they go to NatGeo and they go, hey, who do you have on Russia? And like 2 sentences in, the guy that I interviewed with, he's like, you gotta meet Sergey.
He is an Emmy Award-winning on-air reporter for Fox Sports and National Geographic, where he hosted 46 features on the Russian culture for the 2018 FIFA World Cup. He's a news anchor, TV host, actor, voiceover artist, a professional Russian-English translator, has a master's degree in broadcasting from the prestigious Columbia School of Journalism. As if that isn't enough, he's a jazz pianist and a composer, performing in New York for over 15 years. Herbie Hancock hires him for piano compositions. Michael Jackson was his dance student, and enlightened monks seek meditation advice from our next guest. Please welcome Sergey Gordeev, aka an American Gordeev.
Listen, I love the way you pronounce that, like jazz pianist. I'm like, make sure that T, put that T in there, jazz pianist.
I'm trying.
Well done.
We have a mega communication artist on air right now with us, so I am trying my hardest to pronunciate and eloquently introduce you the best as I can.
You did great.
Thank you. But before we get started into your life story and incredible things you've been able to accomplish in your life, and your story of coming from another country to here and pursuing your dreams and conquering them, we're going to put you through a prefrontal cortex warm-up like you've never experienced. It's called the brain freeze frenzy.
Okay.
It's a wild array of random questions fired off rapid style. Are you ready?
So the rules are just like you quickly answer as quickly as possible?
Precisely.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
First one, what is one positive thing you can say about yourself today?
I rock because I'm up for anything. This is actually my 3rd interview today.
Wow. What were the other 2?
The first was I went live for Russian television to talk about just an update from New York. The second one was an Instagram live interview about conflict resolution. So we talked about how to use communication to lessen and resolve conflict in your life.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible, man. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about your kick-ass morning routine. What gets you really started in the morning?
Look, there is what I should be doing, and there is what I was doing this morning, Totally two different things. But I mean, look, your morning, each morning is a gift. Each morning is a miracle, right? Like when, how they say, like in spirituality, I'm a very spiritual person, so I apologize in advance to those who may find it a little bit much, but it's just what I am, it's who I am, it's my life. I believe that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. So here we go. I said it, that's how I live. So, when we when God or the universe, when the spirit is restored in your body in the morning, already you're starting with a miracle, right? So I start my morning rejoicing in that. I'm like, wow, cool. I get a gift of another day on this earth in this form this time around. This is awesome. So
Amen.
I start with that thought, right? Then there is a little spiritual kind of book, little spiritual book. It's one of the seminal works in spirituality as we know it. It's called A Course in Miracles. And in the Course in Miracles, there are 4 questions with which they recommend you start your morning. And you ask God or the universe or whoever, or yourself, these 4 questions. What would you have, where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say, and to whom? Right? So you start your morning with those. You're conscious. You woke up, right? You turned off the alarm. You're like, okay, those are the 4 questions. It's like you tune yourself right away into kind of alignment, right? So you go like, okay, whatever it is that I do today will be the answer to these 4 questions. Where should I be going? What should I be doing? What should I be saying, and to whom? With an overarching intention of whatever it is that you do today to somehow make either yourself or this world, which is really the same thing, a better place.
Wow.
So,
I love that.
So
That's amazing.
I start them every morning with rejoicing in the miracle of waking up, which is a gift. Each day on this planet is a gift. It's not a given. A lot of people, did not wake up today with that gift. They just didn't. We did, right?
Especially in this time.
I know. Like we're in the coronavirus epidemic. In New York City alone, 7,000 people have died already, and many more are dying every single day, right? So, life should never be taken for granted, right? So when you wake up in the morning already, if you start with this outpouring of gratitude, like this spontaneous combustion reaction of like, wow, miracle, gift, I get this. This is so awesome. Already it sets you up for a different kind of day if you didn't do that, right? Then structure it in your consciousness with the 4 questions. Where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say, and to whom? If you're a spiritual person like I am, then I trust that, the answers will come to me and will guide me throughout my day no matter what I do. And automatically what it also does, it gives you confidence that even there are things that will happen to you today, you might not understand them. They might not make sense to you. They might upset you. They might be bad, quote unquote, because I actually don't believe that there are, bad things in your life. Everything is, learning material. It's all material for growth and self-development. So basically, if you start with those 4 questions, it helps you kind of tune into the attitude that whatever happens will be for your benefit. You or somebody else will learn from it, or will grow from it, or will be better from it. So you right away, you get yourself in the right mindset. That's spiritually and just mentally. Then what I try to do every morning, I don't always get to, because sometimes emails and phone calls start pouring in. I start checking my phone. I see like what all the texts I've missed and all that stuff. But before I get to all that flood of information, I try to meditate, because meditation is not sort of like a woo-woo, whatever, chant your chants and magic dances kind of thing. It actually is scientifically proven to optimize the work of your brain and your energy kind of constitution for the most productive, the most harmonious, balanced, and overall bettering, for you kind of operation, right? So meditation is huge. We can talk about it later. There are actual benefits, there are techniques, but I try to at least, get 5 to 10 minutes of meditation in. It centers me, it balances me, it sets me up for a great day. Another thing I try to hang, because physically I have a bar. And just if you hang, what you do is you get your spine aligned. Just kind of you get your kinks out, and you just hang for for 30 seconds. You're getting the spinal fluids to flow. You're strengthening, you're lengthening your body. This happens, and then depending on the type of morning you have, then there are different things you can do to prepare for that.
That's amazing.
How are you hanging? Have you got some hardware for that? One of those chairs, perhaps?
It's a thing in the doorway that hangs, and it just hooks onto the whatever it's called, the frame of the door. You hook it to the frame, and it locks in, and you hang from it. I literally jump up and hang from it.
Well, this next question rolls right into something that I just had a thought of when you said that. What's one of the most embarrassing moments, mess ups on stage performing jazz, dance, or on air?
Oh my God. Well,
listen.
Listen. I mean, I've had a few, and I've had. I have cursed on air, which was not cool. There was a moment.
What was it? What word?
It was on Russian television, and
well, enlighten us.
It was actually super funny because the league of the big helmet, like there is a sports sort of championship. There's a big helmet cup,
okay.
And the word for helmet is shlem. The word for member, which is slang for like dick, is член. And so basically, instead of the big helmet championship, I said the championship of the big dick. I mean, like that's what came out, and I misspoke. But then I started laughing, and I wouldn't stop. And they had to go to other pictures, just give me.
Exactly.
I laughed out loud so hard, like that I went sweating in my face. My makeup ran, and it was awful. There was that, and there was a couple of moments like when I was auditioning in New York. One time and like I said, everything is a learning experience. I lied that I was able to roller skate, and this was the worst. Like literally, I'm like feeling the color in my cheeks. Like I'm bursting in shame right now just thinking about that moment. It was awful because quite literally, like I was to say that I fell on my ass is to say nothing, because it was actually for an audition in early 2000s. I was quite a dancer, and I went to like Broadway auditions. I was at that point just really dreaming of a career on Broadway, and I was really good. I went to the Alvin Ailey School for
You
dance,
are
and,
very good. I've seen you.
Listen, I was really good, and so anyway, I went to an audition for a Broadway show. It was called The Donkey Show. It was retelling of Midsummer Night's Dream in a disco kind of era. And so I auditioned for the role of Dr. Wheelgood, right? And so it was like, I had my it was disco, right? Disco. Neon green shorts, just picture it. I was, like me, but like way younger and hotter. Anyway, so.
That's impossible.
And yet there I was, neon green shorts, like tight clothes, just like doing my best disco moves, wearing, 6-inch platform shoes. I was living it. I mean, so much so that I just, like in the audition, the dance audition, I killed it. Like, I mean, literally, they were just like, you come forth, like, show everybody how it's done. And I did. Oh, I went to the callback. They were like, oh, dude, you're like it, right? So they actually had me come to the show on Broadway, like, and the dancers pulled me up on the stage, and I was like grooving with them, like literally, like I was just a shoe-in for, this was a great like moment. I felt so awesome. And then the director goes, well, you do know how to roller skate, right? And apparently, I don't know how I missed it, but I guess there was a line in the audition thing that like you were supposed to know how to roller skate. I was like, sure, because it was like I was this close to my dream of being on Broadway, and I was like, okay, of course I do. And look, I didn't quite lie, because inline skating, right? I grew up in Russia, and in the winter we have winter skates, like the skates that are inline. And so I figured, and I've once or twice I have done the inline skating, roller skating, right? Like where the four wheels are inline, and that I could do perfectly well, fine, because I grew up doing that. So I was like, fine, sure. Well, it turns out it's the four-wheel roller skates, the ones that are, the roller disco kind of roller skates, like the ones that actually form a square. Oh my God. So like, okay, and so I didn't think much of it. I went to Paragon Sports. I got myself a thing. I still have those roller skates for the Sergey Gordeev Museum. You know, they're there. I purposefully did not get rid of them to remind myself what happens when you lie, never lie. Anyway, even a little. So I put on the roller skates. I was so arrogant. I didn't even like think of like actually giving it a go. I was like, sure, it's fine, whatever. So I come to the audition. Now at that point, like 10 people, it's like, picture like Last Supper, right? Like 10 people are sitting there like at the long table, and I could see the director going like, oh my God, he's great, like just watch. And so they turn on the music and it starts pumping. And I'm like, I'm at that point, I'm like, put on my roller skates and I roll out, and I was like, oh, I'll just do my moves. And all of a sudden, I realized that there's no earth under me. Like this, like it's like imagine Earth spinning and you don't know where you are. I lose my complete orientation in space. It's just terrifying when you understand that you have zero control over what's going on. And I was like, but the thing that they teach actors always is commit. 100% commit. Whatever you do, make it a strong choice. So I decided I'm just gonna dance. I'm gonna dance, and I'm like dancing, and of course, like the wheels do this, under me, and I start at like a slow motion. I start losing my balance, and like in those movies in slow motion, I slowly just kind of like ugly fall, like with confusion and fear and desperation on my face. And I'm watching their faces and they're like, oh yeah, like they're into it. And then they're like, how like that changes into this like look of horror, like of like what the hell is going on? And I'm planting my face on this like dance floor. And I'm at that point I did not stop. I said, you gotta commit. I said strong choices, Sergey. Anyway, so I am trying to get up. I'm like, my ass is up in the air. I'm like clawing at the dance floor, trying to somehow regain my footing. I'm like, there's like, I am trying to like, oh my God, I'm like sweating just thinking about it. This is so deep shame.
Yeah, me too, man.
Anyway, so at that point, I'm like trying to claw my way up, and it's horrible. And the longer it goes on, the longer everybody's like kind of grabbing each other in disbelief. They're like, what the hell is going on? And I'm trying to like, as I'm like trying to get up and I can't, I try to like actually gyrate to the music and they're like, oh my God. And finally like they turn off the music, and in silence I crawl off and I just run away. It was the most shameful, embarrassing like moment in my life, I think. Although there were a few runner-ups. Okay.
Woo. Those are the best. Okay.
Lesson learned, never lie.
Let's move on to the next one.
Yep.
Favorite broadcast host on TV right now and why? Other than yourself, because we know you do that too.
I happen to love Oprah. She does an amazing series, Super Soul Sunday. She speaks with thought leaders and spiritual leaders and people who are truly in the position to change the global consciousness, like Eckhart Tolle, like Deepak Chopra, like people who truly dive in. I love what she's doing with Super Soul Sunday. I love Brene Brown, who broadcasts on the internet. She wrote the book, The Gifts of Imperfection. Her TED Talk about vulnerability. She's just shame, and vulnerability expert. I love her, and I really recommend it to everybody. And I like Ian Van Zandt because she actually is a soul healer, and it's a way of life coaching that's totally different from like, serious life coaches that are there, but it's so effective. I love her. So those are three that I truly respect.
Beautiful. If you could go back in history and get drunk or high with anyone, who would it be and why?
Oh my gosh. Honestly, I've always been fascinated with genius just as a phenomenon. Right? And so people
Me too.
Who I would consider, there's obviously Einstein, genius. There is obviously like Tchaikovsky, musical genius, or Mozart, right? There are scientist geniuses. So those are two that just jumped out at me. So either one of those, I would just like, because drinking or being high is an expansion of consciousness, and those are pretty amazing worlds to begin with. And like when that expands, I would just love that. Like to get high with like Einstein, that would be cool.
Just break the wall down and just what is he really like behind it?
Well, not even like because like we can talk about self and what are you as a self, right? Like what are you really like? I mean that you're many things, you're actually, let's make a note to talk about that, how we really are a bunch of roommates living in an apartment. That's what we truly are, and we can talk about them. It's really important stuff that I realized about the self, right? Self-awareness powers everything I do, everything I work with, my work in communication, as a journalist, as a, person, in life. Self-awareness is key to productivity. This podcast is called Call to Action. When you do action, you have to know which parts of yourself you're feeding or you're engaging or, you're reacting to, or which parts of you are reacting to whatever you're doing or not doing, right? So study of self, no matter what you do, is a extraordinarily important thing, to engage in if you're going to be successful. And all successful people do it in their way. So it's not like the real self versus not real self. It's like the many facets of self that unfold endlessly and in a fascinating way.
Well, absolutely. And we're feeling this now. Being one of our first truly remote, this is over Skype, given the times, where it's definitely the vibes you're sending off there. We're getting them. We're getting them across the inner weasel. Also, being where you are in New York City, and you guys, certainly are the most affected in this country. Is this your first career quarantine?
Well, yes. I'm trying to think. Well, there was a blackout, but that was totally different. Like that was more like a party.
Yeah.
In New York, there was a big blackout.
A little different.
That was different.
Yeah.
This is the first time I've actually been sequestered and like to the point. Honestly, I feel like I should start a podcast called "The Gifts of Corona" because, for as horrible as this time is. It's bringing us gifts, right? Like to come back to, how we start our morning, how the morning is a gift and anything that happens already is a bonus, right? Like we woke up, it's a gift. So the gifts of Corona, we're realizing, we're all imprisoned in our homes, right? And we're realizing just how precious simple things like being able to walk outside are, things that we take for granted, like a hug. Like I was actually on Russian television this morning saying, jokingly that, there were memes on the internet how now, people are so deprived of physical contact that porn sites, instead of like porn, put on like pictures of friends hugging, because that's what gets people off, not like actual like sex. Because people are so longing for just a friendly hug. The things that we don't think about, but now that we're deprived of it, like we're like, whoa, like I haven't touched a person in a month. It is, I live by myself, and a lot of New Yorkers do too. And so you're distancing and an exchange of energy I hope we talk about that, how energy is a part of everything we do. It's certainly a part of my professional life and personal life. So exchange of energy between people is hugely important. And touch between people is hugely important. And so now we're, kind of in this weird time when we're encased, with ourselves and we can't touch each other, and it's strange. It's strange, but it's also the gifts of Corona. The entire world, humanity has been grounded. Like you're grounded and you sit there and you think about your bad behavior, you're
True.
We're almost like not asked. I was gonna say we're asked. We're forced to sit by ourselves and stare at ourselves and look inward and kind of come face to face or, soul to soul with ourselves. And that's huge. That's what's happening, like Eckhart Tolle, he wrote a couple of really good books, The Power of Now and A New Earth, which was just re-released. Oprah did a wonderful thing. I recommend it to everybody on her podcast. There are 10 chapters, and she did 10 conversations with Eckhart, to talk about each chapter in A New Earth. And he talks about this thing where right now we are, as humanity, at this point where where the only two possibilities are either mass enlightenment or mass destruction. We either are going to enlighten en masse or we're going to self-destruct en masse, because that is how far we've gone in the way we have been doing things. And so the whole pandemic situation where everybody's forced to stop and think and just listen, right? Like that's kind of what's happening, like mass enlightenment.
Absolutely. So, because you're a communications expert, what is your biggest pet peeve people do when they write or speak that drives you nuts?
What drives me absolutely nuts is when people speak without even giving themselves the trouble of trying to understand what is it that they're trying to say. When people speak just for speaking's sake. When you're in an act of communication is a partnership. It's a process in which you engage. It's like you're basically, we're here in this body this time around for a very limited time, right? Like, so seconds and moments and minutes are precious. So if I engage you in an act of communication, like right now, we three are engaging in an act of communication, with each other and as a unit with the outside world, right? So what we're doing is we're telling people, we're telling people this is worth your time. And then if it's not worth their time, if we don't know what we're trying to say, if we just blab for blabbing's sake, right? Like, that's annoying that we've actually claimed somebody's time. We said, hey, give me some of your time. I promise it'll be worth it, and then it's not, right? if you don't know what you're trying to say. Like, so in communication, the most important thing is to know what is it that you're trying to say before you try to say it. I think.
Totally fair. And we're certainly all feeling it. Your very deep kind of spirituality through all these questions. Let's just hop back up onto the surface real quickly. If you were to jump on air at the last second and you had only time to fix one thing, would it be messy hair, spinach in your teeth, or a stained and wrinkled t-shirt?
All three are really not good.
You have to choose one and one only.
Listen,
I know you have an answer.
I think the spinach in the teeth, honestly, again, as a communications expert, I teach actually communication, and what I teach is that there are things that help communication and things that impede communication, right? So that stand in the way of a clear delivery of your message. So as you're trying to communicate, what you want to do is be the least in the way of your communicative effort, right? So like, I was just thinking, what would distract me most if I were looking at somebody on TV, right? Like, okay, their messy hair, their t-shirt, like definitely the spinach in the teeth is like, I'd be like, that would be, and like all I would see is that spinach. I would not even like hear that person.
Fair.
What's the weirdest place you've meditated?
Wow, I've meditated on planes. I've meditated in bathrooms, like bathroom activity. I've meditated. I've practiced meditative living. I've literally like meditated through sex, like in a really good way. I've meditated, but like sit down and meditate.
You need to teach me some of those techniques.
Oh my God, it's next level stuff. I'm just,
well,
it's a whole
let's
separate
dive a little.
podcast.
How do you do that? How do you even get to that point?
Listen, it's called mindful living, right? And we're not saying like, okay, let's just like stop what we're doing and like time out, we're meditating. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about layering that onto what you're doing, right? Like let's take eating. If you're, I'm a foodie. And in general, like sensations are such a gift, right? Like, so sometimes I'll be swimming around, like I like to go naked in the like naturiest beaches, right? And I love how the warm, like in Caribbean waters, like in Miami, there is a hollow beach that's just like nude, right? And so when the water is super warm and soft, and it's not like, it's just kind of like just like this, and you're gliding through it, and you just feel like 1,000 puppies are licking you all over, and it's so pleasant. It's like, oh my God, I'm thinking this is gonna be so awful, like to not have that. Like I was like, at some point I'll die and I won't have this body, and I'll miss this. I'm like, oh, this is so good, right? So that's meditation. That's mindful. When you're not thinking about anything else while you're doing something, when you're so engaged in that moment that it multiplies by 1,000.
Gotcha.
When I have food, I love good food, right? So the other day, I was just craving something special. So I did this, salivating right now just talking about it. Like I did these scallops, right? And so butter, like this really good butter, and I know they were fresh baked scallops, and I peppered them like with fresh ground pepper and salt, and I had the skillet was just like really hot, and I seared them. I threw them in like. Psh, and I like rolled them around and like pepper and salt and then butter, and they made that sound, and I just put them out on the plate, and there's steam was coming off them, and I put one in my mouth, and I was like, I'm in heaven. I cannot even, like that was just, it just washed all over me, and so I wasn't like checking my phone while I was eating. I wasn't on the phone with somebody while I was eating. I was just eating. I was eating, and all my neurons were firing. Oh my God, this is divine, right? Well, and during sex, you can complete that, analogy to what you might do during sex. Just like be there.
Beautiful.
And so there that it's next level.
Wow, you might want to check your door real quickly. Some of our listeners might be waiting.
Maybe at your
for
front
a little
door.
Taste of those scallops.
Listen.
All right, fired off. We got a few more. Let's rock through them.
If you could be an inanimate object for a day, what would it be and why?
I would want to be my Christmas tree, which I love. We decorate it in December, and it's in my apartment until June. All my friends come over, and we put decorations on it. I feel like they're putting their love on it, and I just love it. So I think it's the most loved tree in the universe. I would love to be it.
Have you ever knocked someone out with a limb while dancing?
Yes.
Nice.
Yes, I have, and I went down with them. It was at an Alvin Ailey Gala, and this woman was just like out, like she was like a loose cannon. She was not a petite lady, and she just like threw herself like literally like take a running start and you go. And I was trying to be nice, dance with her. And quite literally in her huge gown, she like shot herself at me, and I was like just holding on to. We went down to get it was not like we went down. We went down on the floor with this high-level donor, and like her millionaire husband watched me kind of in the folds of her huge big gown trying to crawl
Hold
out.
on. The real question is, did you close the deal? Did they still donate money?
Let's just say they didn't take their donation away. It's all good. It was understood that all was in good spirit.
That's all that matters.
The intention, good intentions.
If coffee was an illegal drug, what would its underground name be?
If coffee was an illegal drug, I don't know. Whatever it would be, I would make sure to get it. I can't live without it. I would find my dealers.
Here's an odd question for you. If you could join the circus, what would you do?
Ooh, that's a good one. You know what I love? I love making people laugh. I'd be a clown. Because I think people who are serving at the altar of, laughter is a healing thing. It's a miracle. It's not just like, oh, ha, ha, ha. It's an opening. So laughter is a sacred, healing, mysterious thing. And people who consciously or unconsciously have power to make people laugh, that's amazing. It's amazing.
I agree.
What is the best book that you've recently read? Especially with quarantine, people staying at home now. Is there something that they probably ought to pick up immediately?
It's not the best book. There are so many good books, it's hard to pick the best. But the last book, I just finished it 2 days ago, was Michelle Obama's Becoming, and I loved it.
Okay.
Loved it because, well, first of all, she is a real person who talks about her real journey, and just, I listened to it, I didn't read it, I listened to it, and hearing her speak about what it means to unfold yourself, that's what we do throughout life. We peel back the layers of who we are as we understand, as we both grow and change and ripen, and so we try to understand our deeper, truer self as that truer self is developing, and that's a lifelong process. And she's so good at just in very plain language describing her life, but with that underlayer of that process. It's really good. I really enjoyed it. I recommend it.
Just like athletes go back in the film room and study previous match, have you gone back to study an interview you've done and realized you just completely bombed it?
Yes. Yes.
I hope we're not doing that here now.
No. You know what I have learned? And I'll tell you the moments, for you as an interviewer, it'll be, but you're already, intuitively you're doing that. when you, and Oprah talks about this when early in her career, she was trying to be Barbara Walters, and then instead of Canada, she said Canada, and then she chuckled, she just said Canada, and like everybody commented on that, like because they saw the real Oprah, like an authentic self come through, you know, so she wasn't trying to be anybody else, and she's like, oh, I cannot be Barbara Walters, like I'd rather be like, you know, a really awesome Oprah than a second-rate like imitation Barbara Walters. So the moments when I went like, oh, cringed and was just like embarrassed, you know, is when I was trying to be somebody else. Like when I was trying to, you know, it was coming from a good place. Like I admire certain interviewers, right? But this is their style. This is them doing them. This is their authentic self, which is why millions, and we among those millions, love them, right? But the best thing we can do as interviewers is be ourselves, and people will be drawn to that. Oscar Wilde said, you know, really, you should just be you because everyone else is already taken. So yeah, be you. That's the best advice. And when I wasn't me, that's when I was really embarrassed and like, oh, cringed.
Here's one that we love a lot, and man, you're probably the best guest to answer this one. If you could call yourself 10 years ago, what advice would you give to yourself? And secondly, if you could call yourself again 10 years in the future, what would you want to ask yourself?
10 years ago, I was actually reaching sort of like my own version of midlife crisis. And I was a successful publicist in New York at that point, and I was like, is that all there is? And it was a kind of a disassembly. I fell apart and reassembled myself, and the reassembled me decided to apply to Columbia Journalism School, and I changed my career entirely. I used all my savings and all my mom's savings to basically, you know, it's $100,000, you know, to go to Columbia for a master's degree, right? Well, because, you know, it's about 60 to like pay for 1 year's tuition, and it takes like at least 40 to survive in New York, and you can't work and do anything else while you're doing it if you're doing it full time. It was like probably the hardest year of my life academically. You know, it was really tough to get in. It was really tough to, you know, to make it through. And anyway, I just feel like 10 years ago when I was doing that, I think what I would have said to myself back then is like, just chill. Like, you know, now I'm much more spiritual now than I was then. And I trust that whatever happens will happen for the best. And I would not have fretted so much. I would not have worried so much. I would not have wasted so many brain cells and burned through so many nervous endings and synapses, just like really, really being upset and worried and hoping and stressed and all that stuff. Now I know, I just trust the flow. Whatever happens is meant to happen. Whatever doesn't happen, you know, is not meant to happen. It was not yours to begin with, right? And so I kind of like, when I got in, it was also a cool story because I fell apart at Christmas 2010, right? I was like, this is not, this is not the truth of how I am. Like, this is not all I'm meant to do. Something else. But what is it? I'm like, oh, I want to tell stories. Who inspires me? Oprah inspires me. What is Oprah? She's a broadcast journalist. Oh, broadcast journalism. That's what I want to do. And I was like, well, to do anything in life, you have to have life experience and you have to have education. Life experience I had, but specific journalism education I didn't have. I was like, oh, I should go to a journalism school. And then slowly I was like, oh, wow, I live next to the world's best journalism school. I live right next to Columbia. And I was like, okay. And so this was on Christmas, right? And this was, I looked up, you know, the application requirements, and I missed the deadline. It was on December 15 at that point. So I called, they were closed, of course, you know, so I was like, okay, I'm going to apply anyway. I'm going to apply online, and I'm going to, like, there was a whole bunch of essays and things to fill out, and financial information and tax returns and transcript from my university in Texas. I went to Southwestern University in Georgetown, Texas, and I was like, everybody was closed. And so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna apply. And I decided that I was at least gonna apply within the calendar year, you know, so we had like 7 days remaining in 2010. So I wanted to at least apply within the same year as the deadline that I just missed. So in that 1 week, I wrote all the essays, I pulled all the materials. I actually even called Southwestern after like all these years, and it just so happened that the registrar, whom I knew, I was friends with the registrar, you know, I called the registrar's office, he picks up, and I'm like, well, is George Brightwell there? And he's like, no, George is not there, I'm the new registrar. It just so happened that the new registrar, on a break, randomly walked into the office to pick up a paper or something that he forgot. At that point, my telephone rang. He decided to pick it up. He's like, odd, but who is calling? I'll pick it up. And that was me on the phone. And I said, look, I need you to email me my transcript right now. And he's like, well, can't you wait? And I was like, no, you've got to help me. And so he did, right? So magically it all assembled and I got all my stuff in. I still have a screenshot of like December 31st, 10:30 p.m. uploading my, your application is complete. I have that screenshot. So back then I already was having inklings of like, if it's meant to happen, it'll be a flow. It'll help you, right? And so trusting that would have, if I trusted that more and knew that like I know it now, I would have worried so much less. And also an inkling of be yourself. First day orientation at Columbia. All the students are asked to stand up. All the professors are there, right? So people who will literally be giving you or not giving you your degree, people who will be teaching you, and all of them are working, by the way, so potentially who will be giving you your first jobs, they're there. Everybody's trying to impress them, right? So everybody's standing up, and you're supposed to stand up and introduce yourself to your classmates and to the professors, esteemed professor of Columbia. And you're supposed to say what it is that you're hoping to do. So everybody, like 17 people before me stood up and said, oh, I want to be a war correspondent. I want to go into the field and report on the human trauma. And like everybody like stands up and says that. And by the way, everybody, like when I got in, it was a whole, separate thing. For 3 months, I was visualizing how I was, going. I live near it, so every time I live on the next subway stop, so every time I passed it, I would just visualize myself like actually walking up the steps and going to class for 3 months until I got a notification that I got in. But anyway, so I got up, and people told me, no matter what you say, now Oprah's cool. Back then she wasn't. Like she was not a real journalist. So they're like, whatever you do not even mention the O word, right? So 17 people before me stand up, and before all the faculty say, oh, I want to be a war correspondent. I stand up and I'm thinking, without even thinking anything, I blurt out, I say, well, I hope you guys don't have a job. Not because I don't want you to have a job, but I hope that there is no war for you to correspond on. I said, I want to be a peace correspondent. I said, I want to be a journalist of the soul. I said, my beat is my heartbeat. I love what Oprah is doing, and I want to be the next Oprah, said I. Everybody erupted in a standing ovation because all these people, and it just came out of me, right? And guess what? At that point, I was like, oh shit, I wasn't supposed to say the O word, and now they're all thinking I'm some sort of a goofy, Oprah fan. But then the very next thing, like we can talk about listening later in the podcast, but listening is super important. At that very moment, a voice came through and said, you know what? If at that moment they don't want you, you don't want them. If your true authentic self is something that's not acceptable to this group of people, then this group of people is not what will be serving you in your growth process. Anyway, so 10 years ago, I would have said, don't worry, the universe has got your back. Just flow.
What about 10 years in the future?
10 years in the future, the question was, what would I say to myself? Or would I ask?
What would you ask yourself?
Well, I'm a nosy bitch. I would ask like what will happen so I can prepare and like just I would want to know what's up, like so that I can like optimize my time and not worry about things, or not like if I know that will be happening, I'll like kind of prepare for that a little better, whatever.
Absolutely, yeah, that's a deep thought, right? So much can come from that.
Congratulations, my man.
Did we do it?
That is the brain freeze frenzy. You've crushed it. We really appreciate all your answers and kind of diving into that. I want to keep the flow moving though, because you're in it, you're in the zone. I want to keep that firing. So can you kind of give us a brief introduction to maybe transitioning from growing up in Russia to coming to the United States, and then how your passion in communication and just being a true lover of people's stories and bringing that out of them to light. Can you walk us through that timeline quickly, and then we'll jump into kind of your first jobs as a news anchor and reporter and hosting shows, and then get into the gamut of it.
Yeah, like so my life from the very beginning has been about connecting, communication, peacemaking, really. Because even like my mom is an amazing kick-ass businesswoman. She headed the Moscow office of the Antonov Design Bureau. So it's an aircraft design bureau. So the founder of this huge aircraft sort of conglomerate, like design conglomerate, chose my mom out of like 14,000 men. He's like, well, this woman is the only one who can do this. So, and my mom was actually dispatched from Kiev, where this was they were based, and she was sent to open the Moscow office, and my dad was actually her chauffeur. That's how they met. So my mom was 30, my dad was 18. He was driving her around in Moscow, and that was the deal. Like, that's how they met. And so so she's always been this really driven, awesome woman ahead of her times. And, so when I was born, she was like, okay, whatever, like kindergarten, whatever it is, like wherever the babies go, and she went to work. She was on her way to work when she was like giving birth to me. She was like, I guess I'm giving birth. Okay, turn the car left, whatever. We're going to go give birth to baby now, whatever. And so like, since I was, 3 months old, they put in Russian facilities, there would be like 50 babies and 2 women taking care of them. And the babies would sit in these rubber little inflatable tubes, like these little whatever, like, and the babies kind of sit like this because the babies can't sit by themselves, so they sit in these like rings, in these inflated rubber rings. And I would just sit there in my rings, and I would just like smile. I'd be like, I could care less about all the babies, like shitting themselves and crying and snotting and like not knowing what to do and like wreaking havoc. I was like, la la la. And these women who were supposed to be taking care of us, actually they ran to me to like, to hug and hold me just to like de-stress. So I was like actually using my nonverbal communication like since 3 months old,
You have
Day
memories
one.
of this, like living memories where, if you really want to reach back, like you can.
It's weird, but I really feel like I was just wired for communication and expression. I distinctly remember, and I couldn't have been, I must have been less than 1. And my mom had this like stroller, kind of like this bed on wheels, that kind of like, she pushed it forward. And I had a brother, 2.5 years older. So at that point he must have been about like 3 or 4. And he like, mom, I remember I was in the thing. I just distinctly remember lying in the thing, and I remember she's pushing me, I realized she's mom, she's doing that. And then my brother, like when she turned away, he started climbing into my thing, into my little crib, like climbing into it. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, like, does he not know you can't sit on a baby? He's gonna break my legs. I'm like, why is mom not watching? I remember actually thinking that. And I remember like the trees. I remember it was outside the entrance to our building. I just remember exactly where it was and how it was. And the mom was like her back and he was climbing in. And I was like, yeah. That's my earliest memory.
Wow.
Well, that's extraordinary. It should be more ordinary, although I feel like a lot of people can't recall that quite far back in their own life.
But like, my point is that from an early age, that is somehow what I ended up doing, right? And look, my dad was an alcoholic, so I had a somewhat tumultuous childhood because, sometimes he'd come and. P.S. He was a brilliant pilot, because he started off as my mom's driver, but then he dreamed of becoming a pilot. He wanted to fly, and then he went to school. So my mom raised like 3 men, my father, my brother, and me by herself. And she's truly an extraordinary woman. Anyway, so he went off, studied, got his, college degree, and went to pilot school, became an awesome pilot, never drank while he flew, but one of the things he did when he wasn't in between the flights, to take, I guess, the stress out, whatever, he was just a drunk and a mean drunk. And, and I learned early on that if you, say the right thing, if when he starts picking on you, when he starts like really just turning nasty, you can somehow, like in judo, I think, you use the force that's coming at you to turn it into something else, right? You don't oppose it, you take it in and you transform it into something else. So I knew, like, if you take some words and if you put them in different context, they don't hurt so much, and so there's less a possibility of a fight. If you just kind of smile and do this and that, like, he might be mean, but then he'll laugh, or he'll engage in conversation and be distracted. So early on, like, again, turning things into gifts. Some, like my brother, for example, like we were in the same environment. He didn't grow up like that, but I did, right? So I used that even subconsciously. At like the age of 8, I was reading Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, not because I was interested in the, communication, but it was just like my survival manual, right? Like, so it was a hard childhood in some ways. It was beautiful, magical childhood. It was amazing, but it also had this component, right? So early on, I just learned of the power of words, power of body language, power of energy, and subconsciously and consciously, I was using it to survive, because violence scared me. When he would, like pick physical fights with my mom, like that truly scared me. And I learned what to say and what to do to kind of dissolve that, right? So anyway, always loved music, always loved dancing, always loved languages, and when I was 12, I had a whole bunch of Elvis tapes which I was obsessed with, and I needed to know what he was singing about. So I was like, Mom, I wanna study English. And she's like, are you serious about that? Because if you're not serious, she just couldn't be bothered. I'm like, yes, I am. So she goes to Moscow State University, which is the top university in Russia. She arranges for me to go to the evening classes 3 times a week from 7 to 10, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So for 2 years, I was actually taking a college level English course. And somewhere a few months into it, I got so obsessed with the English language itself. I forgot all about Elvis, like all that like was just gone. I was just fascinated with the music of the words, like how, again, if you use a certain word or a combination of words, how it just affects you in a real tangible way. And it was music to me. It really was. And so I would like live at the Library of Foreign Languages, and we had these, tape, not the tapes, but these like whatever rolls with the magnetic tape where you just put that on, and they had this really outdated equipment, and you just put that on, put your headphones on, and I would just listen to CNN, to NPR, to just all these different things that they had in the library. Loved it. And anyway, at 14, I was working as an interpreter in Moscow, and my first job was European Nuclear Disarmament Convention in Moscow. And so one of the people who attended the conference came with a son, my age. I was 14 at the time. There was a floating conference. They got on a boat between Moscow to St. Petersburg. They flowed up the rivers for 2 weeks, and we became really friendly with that family. And that family was like, oh, why don't you come to Texas as a exchange student? I was like, well, that would be really cool. And what did I know as a 14 and 15-year-old? I was like, well, that's, I want to see this beautiful land where people speak this language that I so love. And, I was like, I didn't really give it thought. Again, retrospectively, looking back at it, it was just the flow of the river of my life. And I just thoughtlessly, but thoughtfully gave into it. So like I went. And so I came to Texas, and then I
Can I put a pause real quick? I have a quick question. Yeah. Was your perspective of the United States being in Russia, what was that like? You hear about the land of opportunity or this or that, and usually a significant percentage of people that do that, because being American, I've moved and lived in other countries as well, and I've had a perception, and it's been completely different. I'm wondering if you had the similar experience.
Listen, I grew up in the Soviet Union, right? So America was our Cold War enemy, and I actually remember, and you watch the news, and I remember Reagan, like I was a child. Even as a child, I didn't know who this Reagan person was, but I knew that he was mean and he wanted atomic war. And I literally, and if there is atomic war, they would show the nuclear mushrooms, and they would have these drills in the schools, right? Like where you'd go under the desk, as if that would like save you from an atomic bomb. And, we had those drills, like you go under the desk, that's what happens, and then you'll be fine. Anyway, so like, I remember going to bed as a little child and looking outside the window in my little room where I grew up, and just kind of hoping, I hope Reagan doesn't start a nuclear war so we all don't die. I remember actually thinking that, like as a little child. And so I'm like, Wow. Then of course America was cool. Everybody wanted to be American and do things that are American. And like when the first flights, the Iron Curtain was lifted and the first flights were going between Russia and New York, and they would show like how you would fly right over the Statue of Liberty, and it was just so cool and so dynamic and so exciting and wonderful. And imagine me after seeing all that, like arriving to a small Texas town, where you got like a couple of streets and a lovely family. They were wonderful, but I just like I had no idea, like it was an adjustment how to live in a small town like that. Again, the gifts, how do you turn that into a gift? I learned introspection. I learned how to be alone and not feel lonely. I learned how to be good company for yourself.
So you move from Russia, you come to the United States, you land in Texas in high school. What was the journey from high school to college? What did that look like?
Well, I actually broke my hip skiing, and that is how I stayed, because I wasn't planning on it. After a year in high school, I was going to go back and go to Moscow State University, but then the family I was staying at kindly took me skiing, and the second day I break my hip. So I have to actually, at this point, I'm stuck for a year and a half while the bones grow together, and then they unscrew all the screws, and then you're fine. But for that year and a half, I couldn't go anywhere. So I was like, well, since I'm stuck here anyway, I'm going to apply to some colleges. So I applied to Southwestern University among a few other colleges, and Southwestern gave me full scholarship because they were looking for an international student. So at that point, they wanted international students. I had good grades. They offered me full ride. So I was like, okay, great. I'll go to school for free. I mean, I still I still had to work because I had 3 jobs actually. I was working as a library assistant, I was working as a computer lab assistant, and I was teaching Russian. I was an assistant professor of Russian. So to just pay my, and I managed the house because I had the family actually bought a house, with several units in it. And so I was kind of like living there for free while, in exchange for managing the house. So I had like 4 jobs actually.
That's awesome.
In college. And so then part of that was that 4-year college experience, which was amazing, really helped me grow into who I am. A semester in New York, an internship where you, for 1 semester, you work in your field, and that's how you get academic credit for it. And at that point, I was working at Jazz at Lincoln Center in their marketing department because, my major by that point was communication. I chose that because that's what I realized I love. And so once you go to New York, for somebody like me who I don't even know how to express my love for this city, right? You just don't go back. So the moment I landed in New York, I felt it was home. So after that semester, I went back, finished out my degree. I came straight back to New York after I graduated. And so my first job in New York was at Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, because that was, it was advertised that you could take dance classes if you worked in the administrative offices, except for I was working from 9 to 9 every day, and so I didn't get to take the free dance classes. And so after a while I figured, if I really want to do this, I got to enroll in the school full time. So that's what I did, and I started working as a publicist to support myself during that time. So I was making phone calls, pitching articles from the boys' locker room while in between classes at the Alvin Ailey Dance Center school at that point. And so slowly I was gaining clients as a publicist in New York. I kind of was this, I was known. I was known as the young up-and-coming publicist at that point, running around with my little clamshell Motorola StarTech phone. It was very cool.
Anyway, the antenna, you're not official until you snap that antenna
you're
up,
not
right?
official until you engage your Motorola StarTech. Very cool. Anyway, and so at that point, so I'm in my, early 20s, just basically making a life for myself as a publicist, and learning my love for communication, and basically realizing that everything that has happened to me before led to this, where I actually get to use it professionally. Because my profession was getting telling people how awesome a dance company is and why they would be fools not to write about it, right? Sharing my excitement about an art form I loved. So if we're talking about like tips for success, one of the major things that I know everybody says, but it's actually true, and everybody says it because it is true. Do what you love, because if you don't love it, you will not be good at it, right? Like, I was an awesome publicist, and I still am. I work with Youth America Grand Prix, the world's largest ballet competition, which was a client in 2000, when it started, and then it grew so big that I actually phased out all my other clients, and that now became my only client.
Wow.
So I still am the director of public communication and external affairs for Youth America Grand Prix, and I'm on the board of directors of the competition. But the point is this: I was good at what I was doing because I loved it. So if you do what you love, you will first of all not get tired doing it a lot, because you do have to put in your 10,000 hours to get really good at something. B, it will not feel like work to you. It'll feel like soul nourishing, activity that you'll grow leaps and bounds, right? So, and the energy, again, if we talk about the 3 channels of communication: words, body language, and energy, your energy will be that of excitement, and people are drawn to excitement, and excitement begets excitement and movement. So, call to action podcast, right? Like, how do you spring into action? Well, excitement is if you will, the engine of action moving forward. Without excitement, without energy, without something that makes you jump, literally or figuratively, there will be no action. So that's what I was doing. I was telling people how much I loved, my clients. And I would not take a client, and I really needed money. I remember being hungry and broke all the time. And I wanted to sleep because I was working so much. So those are 3 things.
That's an important thing to have in your tool belt. It's a little sleep.
Listen, I was working so hard, I wasn't getting enough sleep. Anyway, the point is that as broke as I was, and as much as I needed money at that point, surviving in New York, it's a special thing, to get to New York and to stay in New York.
Yeah.
It's super expensive, it's hard, it's rough, it's not for the, weak-willed and people who are not really driven, right? So to stay in the city takes a lot. So as much as I needed money, I would not take a client if I personally didn't love their work. I would just say I'm busy, whatever, even if I wasn't, because you don't want to hurt their feelings. But the point is, if you personally can't get excited about something, you'll be lying trying to get others excited about it, right? As a communicator, publicist, whatever, right? So that was, I think, the secret. And I was a successful, publicist at that point, because everything I was doing, I was only doing things that I loved. So then Youth America Grand Prix grew larger. It started as an American ballet competition. It's a scholarship competition for kids. The idea is really simple. We go around the world. There are all these kids trying to audition, to get into good schools. There are good schools auditioning talented kids because they really want talent for their school. And so, a lot of the time the connection is missed because the kids either don't have the money, or they don't know, or they can't go to every school in the world, right? And the school can't go all around the world. Every school can't do that. So we're like, we'll go around the world. We'll pick the talent. We'll bring the talent to one spot, and then we'll bring the directors of all the others, all the best schools in the world to that one spot. It'll be the world's largest dance audition, and it's just simple but brilliant, right? So it's super successful. It was growing, and I was, some 10 years into the competition, I was really just getting restless, and I was like, is that all there is? And that's when I went to Columbia Journalism School and got my master's in broadcast, and then I started my TV career. And I graduated in 2012, and right after graduation, I landed an on-air news anchor job on a Russian channel, the largest of the 3 channels broadcasting in New York. So I was on air in New York right out of school. So that was really cool. Again, why? Because I was doing something I deeply, passionately loved. And at that point, it was kind of like a mid-career for me. So I was an older student. So most kids were right after college, going straight for their masters. I had, some good 10 years on them
of work experience
and life experience, right? And my decision, I wasn't like, oh, this is hard, which some people were. I was like, I fought for this. I want this. I'm using all my savings and all my mom's savings for this. It's a conscious choice, and I'm going to supersize that choice to the maximum degree that I'm capable of, right? So I was grateful for every second of that experience, and that was for me the hardest year of my life because of how much work you had to put in, because really it's a 2-year program that's compressed into one. That's kind of what it feels like and what it is. And it's demanding. And so
intense.
It's super intense. It's super intense. Anyway, so I went through that, loved it, chose it for myself, really took in the gift. Then my first job in 2012 was as a news anchor on Russian NTV America. It was a Russian language news program that was broadcasting nationally in the United States. So I did 3 newscasts throughout the day and 1 evening news program. Then I also had my own interview program called Persona Grata. That's when the artists and celebrities would come, to New York, and I would interview them and do what you guys are doing, which is like take people's stories and hoped that in conversation and in revealing their stories, people who listen might get something that inspires them.
Absolutely. That is such a true statement right there, because that's kind of one reason why we started this podcast, was because, Keith and I we work long hours, digits, code, design, clients, but we listen to podcasts quite often in the background while we work. And as corny as it sounds, there's sometimes when you're listening to something that someone's saying and it's just the way that they say it, you've heard it 10 times prior in your life. It never clicked. But the way that person said it in that moment, just something happens and it moves you. It pushes you in a direction, like literally physically and mentally. And you kind of grow. You're like, wow, I didn't understand that perspective until this moment. I've heard it, but now it clicked. And that's kind of the reason why we're doing this podcast, is that not only the name call to action is something technical in our world where it's a button you press on a website or a mobile app, it's something that takes you to the next level, but the double entendre is that call to action in people's life. That's why we interview people such as yourself that have had this kind of really incredible story and have been successful. And it's not a journey that's just straight linear. It's this up and down path, but that call to action is something that whether someone says it or how you listen to it, it's something that's going to move you to be better in life. And that's exactly right. You're spot on.
And that's what separates an excellent interviewer from an average one.
Well, because an excellent interviewer does it with a purpose. Like I said, in our beginning round, what's a pet peeve for me in communication when people are talking without realizing what they're doing and why they're doing it, right? So a good interviewer, like you guys and like what I was trying to be, is we talk, we listen with a clear intention that whatever it is that this in this person's story that helped them, hopefully it'll help others. Whatever it is that inspired that person, or they realized or learned or understood in that moment of difficulty. Perhaps somebody else is going through similar difficulty, maybe not the same circumstances, but the same exact challenge, right? Like trying to overcome it or deal with it or whatever. So maybe it'll help them, right? So a good interviewer listens for those nuggets that could be helpful to their audience, in the stories of other humans. Humans get inspired by humans. That's what happens. And that's why I was drawn to it. That's why you guys were drawn to it, because we're all, and this is a little bit spiritual in myself, but we're a network of human forms connected to each other. We are. And we are here so that we can help each other grow. I firmly believe it. I fully believe it. I live my life with that intention, that whatever, I mentioned that I start my morning with 4 questions. Where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say? And to whom, right? With the goal, with the hope, with the intention of somehow making this world a better place, making lives of other humans somehow better because of something I did, said, or, whatever, something that happened between me and them.
Wow.
Do you think that your journey, like in just taking a side note from the flow of where we are in your timeline, but do you think maybe like your yearning for being able to communicate with people and connect with them and things was almost like in a you know, you don't have to answer this, but it's something that I personally experienced as well, something similar to your background with your father, just with my mother. But do you think it was something that you used as a gift that you naturally had to kind of connect with people and use it to fill a void in a way that maybe you felt that a relationship you didn't have with your father, that, okay, I couldn't have as good of one. Maybe you had a decent one, but you know, there's that void when they're not the parent they're supposed to be, right? At least, you know, in certain circumstances.
You know, life and people in your life are a reflection of you in some way. So if you are not able to connect, let's say, to your mother or to your father, it's a part of you that you may not be connecting with. And so when you're connecting to that part of you, when you forgive that part of you, that's when that finds its external reflection in your relationship with other people. So maybe it's your own. It's an example. I don't know your issues, right? But let's say, as an example, if somebody has real issue with themselves, unable to manage their anger. So if they themselves don't know how to manage their anger, then that will keep showing up externally in their relationships with other people. And until you yourself looking inward, that's why meditation and self-awareness is key to any growth or success professionally or personally, you know, until you understand it and introspect and welcome that part of you and try to connect to that part of you, it'll keep showing up in your relationships externally. You know, I forgave my father for the hurt that he has caused me and my brother and my mom and himself, you know. And the way I was able to do that is by forgiving the parts of me that have hurt other people, by understanding that sometimes good people, quote unquote, do bad things, quote unquote, because of whatever circumstances they're facing, because of not knowing any better, because of inability to understand just how much they're hurting themselves and others by doing A or B, right? So sometimes you don't know, sometimes you know, but it's you're reacting to a hurt that was inflicted upon you, you know? So there are different reasons why good people, quote unquote, do quote unquote bad things. So I truly forgave my father for everything, you know, for the suffering that he's caused to us by understanding and really taking ownership of the suffering that I have caused to others when I didn't know any better, when I was being selfish, when I was disregarding, and maybe I wasn't like physically abusing them, but maybe I was abusing them with my words. Maybe I was abusing them with my inattention. Maybe I was abusing them by not listening to them when that's what they truly, really needed from me, right?
Right.
Denying somebody the dignity of being heard can hurt somebody just as badly as attacking them, you know, and sometimes more.
Yeah.
You know? So
Absolutely.
it's by looking inwards and forgiving those things for yourself that gives you an ability to forgive others, and that's a powerful thing.
And on that topic of being heard and not being heard, this would be an excellent time in the dialogue to just chat with us a little bit right now about being a reporter and an interviewer. How did that get started? Does it kind of spawn out of the same sentiment of who ought to be heard and who ought to be listening?
Yeah. In general, for a reporter, for an interviewer, for a communicator, the number one skill, the one skill that will basically make a difference between you being successful or not, is the ability to listen, right? So, and my particular, the reason I wanted to report on the human condition is because I'm endlessly fascinated with people. I'm fascinated with myself. I'm fascinated with the world inside. I'm fascinated with the world inside you guys. What makes us, you know, say the things we say? What makes us do the things we do? What parts of us react in what ways? It's a fascinating world that we are. I'm fascinated by it, right? Like endlessly curious. I study it with awe and fascination, right? And so for me, reporting is something that is just a result of my interest. That's what's interesting to me. That's what I want to know more about. That's what I never get tired of studying and learning and understanding, right? So that led to one application of that is what I learn, I share. So for example, when I was doing National Geographic, that was an interesting gig. It was actually what I got my Emmy for that series of reports.
Beautiful piece of hardware right
that
there.
Is a
She's
beautiful
a gorgeous
piece of hardware.
beast.
She's so pretty. This beautiful lady holding a world of
endless possibilities.
Endless possibilities, yes. Look, so when you're passionate about something, then the opportunities to express that passion, if they're helpful to others, they find you. So, one of the things, I love National Geographic. I love, their fascination with the planet. And for 130 years, they've been, for 130 years, for more than a century, they've been bringing the beauty of, this planet to humans who are fascinated with it, right? And so, what an interesting connection, how that happened in my life, that where I literally was just friends with a fellow colleague at Columbia Journalism School. She is an awesome reporter. She later said to me, you're one of the few people who were actually nice and kind to me. I think she said that I may have helped her with, some project or just even talk to her. I didn't even think twice about it because I was like, here's a nice person. She seems like she could use a supporting sort of word or two in conversation. And I just made a point of coming over to her, introducing myself, and we became kind of friends. And she later said to me that this helped her get through school because she was going through a really tough time. Anyway, so this person, these random acts of kindness and connection led to her actually, when she was working on National Geographic, saying to her boss, the guy who hires talent for National Geographic, saying, hey, Sergey is amazing. I think he is. You really should meet him. So she introduced me to the VP of talent at NatGeo. I went for an information interview, and he, we had a fabulous conversation. He said to me, look, I don't have a job for you. You're awesome, but we can't hire you because I don't have a job for you right now. Several months later, cut to FIFA World Cup 2018. So I didn't know this, but apparently soccer is the #1 most watched single sport tournament on the planet. Billions
absolutely.
of people.
I could have told you that.
By a long shot.
Billions of people stop their lives to watch men's World Cup. To watch
and
men play
women's
soccer.
now, and women's. Let's
And
not
women's,
forget them
right,
now.
but
They actually
men's-
have
men's-
more hardware than the men
Women are amazing.
in USA.
But in general, in terms of statistics, men's World Cup is the most watched thing on television,
Yes.
period. Of
Period.
anything.
No
Pandemics and wars and elections and Olympics, all of that, above
No.
that is the soccer world championship, right? And so Fox Sports at that moment in time owned National Geographic. It was one of their sort of subsidiaries. And so they paid an extraordinary amount of money to be the sole signal. So they bought the rights to show FIFA World Cup in the United States. And they're like, well, we've invested all this money into this thing. How can we make it interesting, and how can we make some money, for us? How do we make it interesting for our viewers? How do we bring in other audiences? And they're like, oh, we own National Geographic. Why don't we, said Fox Sports very wisely. I love the way they were thinking because it was really, truly, that's why the Emmy, right?
Brilliant.
We won the Emmy as Fox Sports team covering the World Cup. Why? Because they said, oh, there are 32 teams on the pitch in the tournament, but the 33rd team is Russia itself, and nobody knows anything about it. So they spend endless hours covering the players, the teams, but the one of the major players, the country where this is all happening, nobody knows anything about. So they turn to NatGeo, and they go to NatGeo and they go, hey, who do you have on Russia? And 2 sentences in, the guy that I interviewed with, he's like, you got to meet Sergey. So that's how I got that job. Just ultimately by being kind to another human being. Right? So what's the lesson in that? Be kind. Don't worry about how it will return to you because that's not what it's about.
Tune in next week for part 2.